Spatial poetry is a dynamic poem placed in space, and an app that realizes such poetry. This app can handle any poem in any language and is therefore a driving mechanism for spatializing existing poems.
4.
It also functions as a
No.
tool for designing the
照
configuration and movement to create new spatial poetry.
Making all the vales rejoice. He is meek and he is mild. Little lamb who made thee.
斜月省省藏海物，不知将月待何人。此时相望不相闻。
Wie jede Blüte welkt und jede Jugend dem Alter weicht, blüht jede Lebensstufe, blüht jede Weisheit auch und jede Tugend zu ihrer Zeit und darf nicht ewig.
Just as concrete poetry was developed from the 1950s onwards, using printing technology such as typography as an important foundation, spatial poetry is based on spatial technology such as AR, augmented reality, and is exploring the possibilities of contemporary poetry. Whilst typical 2D and 3D text poems are presented on separate pieces of paper or screens, spatial poetry is superimposed on the surrounding space, emphasizing the relationship between the viewer's body and the real environment. Specifically, this app arranges poems spatially so you can walk around and read them. If the poems overlap or are located far apart, you are able to read them in their entirety by moving around. You can also add movement to the poem as a whole or to individual parts, changing their arrangement with time. For example, letters or sentences may move in sequence or come closer to you, one after another.
Hope is the thing with feathers
Furthermore,
that perches in
you
the
can
soul
rotate
and sings the
and
tune
move
without the
a poem
words,
freely
and never
without
stops
limitations,
at all.
and you can read part or all of a poem aloud. If you break down the poem into letters, emphases, and lines and arrange them in a scattered manner, you will be able to move around and read the poem by relying on some sort of hints, for example, a series of hues. You can see the overall ambience of the poem as if it were a probability cloud, and the combination of letters and sentences to create different meanings. Placing poems
活或
spatially
山河在，
and giving them movement in this way calls for physical
重
and
春草
active
木深。
appreciation. This is a special feature of spatial poetry that is not found in printed or recited poetry.
Little
Most
lamb who made thee,
importantly,
dost thou know who
spatial
made thee, gave
poetry
thee
is
life
placed
and
in
bid thee
real
feed by
environments.
the stream and o'er the
Even
mead,
if it is the
gave thee
same
clothing
poem,
of delight.
a poem placed in a meadow and a poem placed in a crowd will lead to different impressions and interpretations. Rather, the question is, what sort of poem should be placed in what instance? Even just appreciating existing poems can be said to be a creative act in choosing a space and considering its layout. In the case of new spatial poetry, it must be created with the text, layout, and environment of the poem being thought of as a trinity.
Show immersive space equals false. If new value. Right curly bracket. Right curly bracket.